Hello, everyone. Welcome to our next episode of YugabyteDB Friday Tech Talks. And I'm Kannan, co-founder at Yugabyte, and pleasure to welcome you all. And my pleasure to also introduce Nikhil Chandrappa for today's topic. Nikhil, it would be great if you can get started by introducing yourself, what you do at Yugabyte, and then introduce the topic for today.
Got it. Thanks, Kannan. Hi, everyone. My name is Nikhil Chandrappa. I'm one of the lead engineers in the ecosystem engineering team. Our team, we build a lot of integrations with the third-party database tools like GraphQL, Spring Framework, and host of other projects. And also we build the drivers for the core database as well. In today's session, we are going to be talking about YugabyteD service, which is going to help simplify the getting started experience with YugabyteDB database for single node to multi-node deployments. So we're going to see how YugabyteD is going to help you easily get started with YugabyteDB topologies. Let me quickly start sharing my screen so that we can go over the presentation. So I'll start the slideshow. Kannan, please let me know if you're able to see my slides.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. In today's agenda, we are going to do the overview of YugabyteD service, like what's the architecture of YugabyteD itself and how you interact with the YugabyteD service. And we move on to the first thing that we want to do, like how you provision a YugabyteDB instance on your local nodes. And then we graduate to more interesting multi-node topologies that we can do in YugabyteD. Along the way, we have few demos, and we're going to end with a YugabyteD UI demo, which you can use for monitoring and managing your YugabyteDB cluster. If you are new to YugabyteDB database, right, there are like few ways for you to get started. So we have YugabyteDB managed service, which is like a fully managed DBaaS, where anybody can go and create a account and start a free tier instance. And also we have YugabyteDB Anywhere, which you can install in your infrastructure and create a self-managed DBaaS. And also we have the core YugabyteDB database itself, where you will have to go and install the database on your infrastructure. So today's presentation of the YugabyteDB service itself targets the YugabyteDB core database. YugabyteD, as I have been saying so far, it's like the service which we wanted to create, which kind of helps developers provide an easy way to get started, configure, and manage your cluster. On a whole, the YugabyteDB overview, right? Like, for the YugabyteDB overview, like we wanted to give what is the internal architecture of a YugabyteDB database looks like. So if you have been playing around with YugabyteDB database, there's like few things that you want to get started. I mean, you have to start before for the database itself, like the YB master service and the T server service. So as and when you try to add new configurations with the CLIs or these services, it kind of starts getting complex. So we want to simplify that getting started behavior with the YugabyteDB daemon service, where it kind of simplifies or provides a consistent and opinionated approach for starting the YugabyteDB topologies itself. And it provides a consistent experience on the cloud as well as on-prem environments. And one of the neat things that YugabyteD also provides, it kind of provides a prereqs check, which kind of provides like warnings if you have not set the prerequisites that are required when you're deploying on a VM. And also it provides an out-of-the-box UI for monitoring the YugabyteDB instance itself. So obviously you can connect to other things like Grafana, etc. But we wanted to package a simple monitoring UI as well for the core database. And the YugabyteDB project currently is in preview and we will GA it soon. Like if you want to play around with it, it is available in the 2.15.00 release. So I've been talking about
yeah. Maybe Nikhil, I just wanted to probably re-emphasize or maybe just provide the background one more time, just for repetition. And maybe if you could put up the slide, two slides, like the slide before you had about the three options.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to call out again that if you're not using the first two options on the left, which is the more either the self-managed DBAS with Yugabyte's control plane, right, YB anywhere, or the fully managed DBAS, then Yugabyte D, this service, new service that Nikhil is talking about, really targets the right option, where typical, open source users, OSS users, when their experience in installing and creating Yugabyte had them dealing with more parts, like you had to separately think about the YB master service, and then you have to think about the YB2 server service, and think about what settings would be ideal for multi-zone, multi-region. So YugabyteDB, this daemon, really tries to simplify that experience of getting started for OSS users, open source users, if you will.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks, Kannan. Moving ahead, so like if anybody new to YugabyteDB, as I said, like if the first thing that anybody want to do is like start a local instance, right? So YugabyteDB or YugabyteD service actually provides a CLI along with it, where you can run different commands for starting your cluster or interacting with your cluster itself. So one of the simplest or the first command that you will have to learn or you would want to know is like the YugabyteD start service. This single command is going to bring up all the processes that are required for starting a YugabyteDB node itself. And also it kind of like prints out all the things that you would need as a developer or a user to kind of interact with the database, like where does the YSQL sh command, like what is the connection string for connecting to YSQL, what is this connection string for connecting to YSQL, all those details, you'll get it out of the box. And these are some of the commands that we actually provide. Like we are going to touch upon few of these commands when we do the demo. Like if you want to get the current status of the cluster, collect logs for some troubleshooting purposes, and if you want to configure a few other things on the cluster, we have commands for doing all those. For anybody to get started, the first thing that you would want to do is go to the Yugabyte downloads page. And in our current demo, like we are going to run all the demo on CentOS Linux VMs. So I have gone to the Linux tab here. And first thing, you'd want to download the latest release that we have for YugabyteDB, which is the Yugabyte 2.15.0.0 release. And you'll enter the tar.z file and run this post install script, and you'll pretty much run the yugabyte start command for starting the cluster. So I have already went ahead and downloaded the release and extracted it out. So let me quickly start my first YugabyteDB instance. So all I'm doing is I'm going to go to the YugabyteD binary will be in the bin directory of the release that we have downloaded. So we just do YugabyteD start. What this actually does is it kind of first runs the system check. If you are running it for the first time, like you might see few warnings like your U limit is not set. If you have not installed NTP, it says, okay, NTP is not installed. Few of those warnings come up. And once the warnings, we don't actually make a hard stop. It's just that for you in your production deployments, you have to make sure that prerequisites are met before you start the cluster. So that's it. Like this actually started the YugabyteDB instance for us. Now I can pretty much go and connect to YSQL SH, and I can like run, create a table, insert few data, a few things like that. Like you can start playing around with the database itself. Like I can just run a query here for the table that we just created. And this actually is a working database that you can get started pretty much in like a few minutes, right? And also we kind of provide a neat utility as part of Yugabyte daemon itself called a demo, which is like you can create a demo data set as part of your database for you to try out the different features of the database. Let me quickly do a demo connect. What this does is this kind of installs a Northwind demo database. Northwind is kind of a database or a schema that Microsoft came up with for emulating a real world e-commerce website. So this this utility what we have provided, this loads the data set, inserts few data, and you can pretty much do the queries that you want. As you can see, these are the tables that got created, and I can go pretty much run any queries that I want, right? So for an app developer, like the only thing that I had to do is download the release and pretty much start with like run the single command called start, and I can do all the SQL operations I want on my cluster. That's how simple it will be for getting started with YugabyteDB.
And Nikhil, one question here sounds like this basic command gets the a database created with replication factor 1. I saw that getting printed earlier. And by default, is it just listening on local host, or can I connect to it from another node now already?
Yeah, actually, that's a very good point. So right now, with the yugabyte start command, it just runs on a local host. For you to make another node connect to it, you'll have to provide the advertised address, like which I'm going to introduce next, which is like, that's where the other nodes which want to join the cluster will use for connecting to a single database cluster.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Going back to our presentation, let's quickly figure out, okay, we talked about how we can do this. Now coming to the demos part, we just wanted to show you like whatever the learnings we did right now just with yugabyte start command, how we can apply this to the more sophisticated or the multi-node deployments we kind of support with YugabyteDB. So YugabyteDB has a few different topologies that it can support, right? Like a single region, multi-zone, single cloud, multi-region, and multi-cloud, multi-region, right? In today's demo, we are going to see how you can use YugabyteD for the first two deployment topologies we have, the multi-zone and the multi-region topology. For us to get started with the multi-zone topology, we kind of use the same start command. Just we'll have to add two additional facts, a few additional flags to it. One is the advertised address, which is like the VM, the private IP or the DNS name of the VM where you want to start this instance, and also the cloud location. Cloud location is nothing but like the rack information or the cloud information that you have, say in AWS EC2 perspective. Like if you have a EC2 instance in US East and US East A, like which is like in Virginia, you will have to set whatever the VM availability zone is for the cloud location. And another thing that we will set is the fault tolerance. So now we are trying to start a multi-zone topology. That's why we want to we want to set the fault tolerance and zone, so that if there is any zone failures, we will be like I will not have any data loss for that kind of zone failures. That will be the first step. And the second step we'll do is, once the first node of the cluster comes up, all the other nodes that will be joining the cluster, all they will have to do is they'll have to provide this additional join flag of the first node so that they all join the existing cluster. This kind of starts creating a quorum and it starts creating the cluster for us. You can add any number of nodes you want. In today's demo, we are going to do a 3-node multi-zone cluster, and I'm going to show you what all things that we need as part of it. And the final step is we are going to be running a yugabyte configure command, which is going to configure all the data placement constraints that you will not need on this cluster. And also it kind of sets the fault tolerance needed for the database itself. Now let's do the actual demo. So I have a few commands that I have already formulated. This is what you will need for starting out a cluster. Right now, my setup is on GCP. I'm running this on US East 1 region, and these are the 3 zones where I have pre-provisioned a VM. As you can see, the first 2 offerings that, as Kannan had already mentioned, the infrastructure and everything we will take care. But in this situation, you will have to pre-provision a VM before starting out these instances. And as you can see, the first start command doesn't require a join flag, and subsequent commands will need a join flag for connecting to the first node. That's the only requirement we have. Like the first node that comes up, whatever the first node that comes up, that will be like all the subsequent nodes will be using its private IP or the DNS name for joining the cluster. So I have already SSH'd into my like all the 3 VMs where I'll be running this. Let me quickly, I have also downloaded the YugabyteDB release, and I will run this first command here so that I will bring the first node up. As you could see, like single node instance versus multi-node instance, there is not a lot of difference. We wanted to maintain a consistent behavior, right? That's why only few flags that we'll have to set for multi-node changes. The first node actually came up, and now let me go and start my second node.
So Nikhil, before you start your second node, one question is, what is the state of the cluster right now? Is it okay?
The state of the cluster right now is in a RF1 factor. So as and when we have 3 nodes in the cluster, we implicitly determine how many nodes are in the cluster, and we will flip the replication factor to 3, which means there will be like 2 additional copies of data in the cluster.
Got it. So could I create tables at this stage and then look at the replication factor and magically it's see the auto promotion later when you add nodes?
Yes, that's possible.
Okay. Depending on the time you have planned, you can do it, or we can just
maybe we can have a follow-up session for that.
No problem. No problem.
Actually, that you can have tables also built in here, and then you can increase the replication factor to 3. It should it will work.
Yeah, sounds good.
Let me go to the second one. So what actually happened now is I had given the join address, right? So what it's saying is now the node actually joined a running cluster, which was RF1. So now we have 2 nodes RF1, which actually joined the existing cluster itself. Now let me bring up the third node. So now we have a 3-node RF3 cluster. As and when the third node joins, we implicitly figure out that we can flip the cluster to a RF3 because there are like enough nodes available in the cluster. That's why we have a RF3 it will be currently in a RF3 single zone kind of a setup, because we still have to run the configure command to make it multi-zone. So the last step that we'll have to run is this configure step, where the data placement constraint and the replication factor, like if you are not familiar with these terminologies, it's perfectly fine. Like Yugabyte kind of wants to take care of all those things for you. If you are a power user, that's when you might want to figure out some of these details. So now I ran the fault tolerance, I set the fault tolerance as zone, and I ran the configure command. You kind of get a response saying that if the configuration is successful, you'll get a configuration successful, and it says primary data placement is geo-redundant, and also you'll have at least one availability zone, like you can survive at least one availability zone failure. Another thing that we can quickly check is the master UI that we have, which kind of shows us where all the availability zone, if the tablets and peers are equally distributed or distributed across the available zones. So
if you could go to the home button there and then look at the see full config.
Yes.
Yeah, that should show that we have we want one replication factor in each of those zones.
Correct.
Like, yeah, and looks like that's, and is like suppose when we ran the configure command with saying, hey, I want zone level fault tolerance, but suppose the nodes in the cluster only had two zones, and suppose you actually didn't have a third zone. Are we careful to report an error?
Correct. We do report error. We'll say configuration unsuccessful, and it will just be in an RF3 single zone setup.
Got it. And one other question is, like, let's say you add 2 more nodes with, then does it think, does it go to replication factor 5 as well? Is it kind of going in the odd number of hops because of raft consensus?
Correct. So right now we have stopped it till RF3. So if you want to actually set a higher replication factor, you can manually do it using configure command, or one can actually do it. Where if you go to configure -h, you will see that we have a replication factor flag where you can go and set the replication factor explicitly.
Got it. So if you wanted a 5-zone setup with replication factor 5,
yes,
that's how you got it. Okay.
Yeah, that's how you do it. Correct.
There is one question also coming in, which was like, is the advertised address the IP address of the underlying VM?
Yes, that is correct. It's the private IP of the underlying VM. So you can actually set it to the DNS name as long as FQDN is set on all the VMs. So there's like a few things that you'll have to set up. Like the IP address is pretty straightforward. That's why for the demo purposes we are doing it. But in a production deployment, obviously you would want to set up DNS and FQDNs on all the VMs.
Thanks, Nikhil.
Perfect. Now let's see the next topology that we want to support, right? Multi-region. We just want to show you how like consistent we have kept the behavior across these topologies, right? So as you could see from zone to region, all I'm changing is like you'll have to specify the regions you will be using, or where the like the cloud location where the VM is actually running, and also the fault tolerance to region. All the steps that you would want to run is actually like the same. So whatever the commands we just ran for the new nodes joining the cluster, that will remain the same. Just the fault tolerance will change from zone to region. And the configure command also remains the same. Just the fault tolerance will change to region, and appropriately we kind of figure out if there are enough regions, the configuration will be successful. You can have one data copy in each region. If the configuration was not successful, it will just go back to the original state of like RF3 and single zone deployment. So that's the default behavior currently we have. So I wanted to check if we have enough time to do the demo, or should I just move on to the last topic?
I think you can do the demo. It probably only take 2 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Cool. Let me go to the multi-region setup that I have. So again, I'm using GCP. Now, only thing is I have 3 different regions that I'm using. I'm using US East 1, US Central 1, and US East 4. And appropriately, I have changed the cloud location information and the fault region information. The fault tolerance information, fault tolerance flag to region. Let me go to the other nodes that I have. These are the 3 nodes that I have on GCP. I will go run the first command. So that since this is the first node, it won't say it is joining an existing cluster. It will just say, okay, RF1 instance or RF1 YugabyteDB cluster has started. Now let me go to the other 2. Not sure. There's already a node running here. Let me just try this. As you can see, like I started the node and it joined the existing cluster that we had started here. And if you see the UID, it's start with 006C, and we have joined 006C.
Yeah.
Then let me go to the third, the last one. Start. If you can see this, it's automatically like join the existing 00C cluster. Now let me go and.
So one question right here, Nikhil.
Yeah.
So given that you have already said that I want to join with fault tolerance equals region.
Correct.
why do we need this additional configure step to tell us the same thing?
So, correct. Like the first start steps, we are just assigning the nodes or the Yugabyte DB instances that we are starting, the information like where that VM is actually located. The command that we run here, it's like a constraint we are trying to apply to the database, saying that I want my fault tolerance constraint to be region, which means the data will be spread across all the 3 regions, which 1 copy each. So that constraint won't be set until we run this configure command.
Maybe just a thought exercise we should discuss more later offline. Meaning, like just like we auto promote from replication factor 1 to 3.
Yeah.
Maybe we already have enough information of what the sort of user intent is, and we could probably auto promote the configuration constraint. I don't know. It's a
I see there you have a valid point. Like I can discuss this offline, or we can discuss this point in the Slack community Slack channel. We'll show you the design why we went this way.
No worries.
Okay.
Thank you.
So it says, okay, it's set. Let's try to quickly see the UI. It's still trying to load balance because we have applied the constraint. So let's quickly see the full config so that you will see that each region will have 1 replicas.
Yeah.
Good.
Wonderful.
Moving along, the last demo of the day is the YugabyteD UI. So we are building a UI. It's kind of in the infancy stages. We'll add more and more features to it. So this kind of provides like an easy way for any users to get started with like monitoring the cluster. Like if you want to see what is happening, or if you want to visualize the current state of the cluster and all those things, you can quickly use this flag called UI is equal to true, and you can oh sorry. Let me quickly. There is a bug in this where we'll have to start the command from the bin directory itself. So
okay.
Give it a second. Okay. It will be running by default in 7002 port. And if you, we should connect it using the public IP address. And this is the UI that you will get. Let me try running a few commands here so that we see some graphs showing up in the cluster. So like right now it kind of shows up like we just did a few operations. So as and when new things are happening, it will show up. I can quickly see like I'm using a very small cluster. That's why it's kind of taking some time, for, like 250 milliseconds for doing a create table. But in an essence, like you can pretty much see what are the live queries that are running, what are the slow queries that are running, like few alerts that you want to do, and any admin operations you want to do. So this kind of connects to a cluster where you will run this UI command. So if this cluster was a RF3 multi-region cluster, you'll see the details of everything. But this is only per cluster basis. This, if you have multiple cluster, you will not give a, it will not give an overall view of the multiple clusters. It's just for one specific cluster. We'll add additional features like all the tables and few other things that we have as part of our other managed services. We'll get all those features here. And if you want to have a similar like YugabyteDB t-shirt, go play around with it, and you can claim your free t-shirt here. So this will you'll get some goodies package from us mailed to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to re-emphasize that by default, YugabyteDB exported a lot of metrics, but graphing and all of this historical stats, live queries, all of that, a lot of that was earlier only exposed through both the DBAS offerings in the Yugabyte Anywhere or the Yugabyte fully managed products. And people, for the open source users, often they had to use the Prometheus APIs and then manage it at their layer. But we are making the getting started experience for developers and open source users out of the box, just with the open source itself having these additional capabilities in the product to view historical metrics and so on. Nikhil, I had one more question. This is around the join command. Like if we kind of go back to your examples where you had those 3 commands, 2 of them, 2 nodes joining, like maybe even in your shell window.
Sure.
Yeah. So is the join argument something that's only used on the very first time when the cluster is forming, and hopefully it's ignored if the cluster is already formed?
Correct. So
the reason I ask is that maybe I can clarify the reason I ask, because often people will put this this kind of a stat command in a service file or a cron file, so that if suppose the node accidentally rebooted, you want to start your service back again. But maybe 6 months into the life of the cluster, maybe this cluster originally started with this node 10.151.0.49, but maybe that node is no longer even in the cluster, 6 months in, because the node was decommissioned. So hopefully this argument is ignored. Otherwise, you have to have a different start command for the very first time, and for your restart, you have to have a version without the -- join.
Correct. So this join command, like it's kind of, since as I told you, it's like a kind of a wrapper that we try to build on the existing tooling that we have for starting the cluster. So the commands that we have already take care of something like that. It won't create a new cluster. It will join the existing one.
Got it. Yeah.
So it's
basically,
like
if it is already joined an existing one, it ignores this argument, right? And just stays in that column.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we're a few minutes over time. I'd like to thank everybody that joined us today for both participating, asking questions, and so on. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nikhil, a lot for excellent demo presentation, as well as the work you have done on this feature. And over to you to say the final thanks.
Oh yeah, it's a collective effort from a lot of my team members. Shout out to like Sanskar and Daniel for as well. The only recent kind of motivation we had was like to simplify the developer experience. I kind of come from a developer background, so that's why I have a lot of empathy towards that. So that's why we kind of started building it out. And we like to have a lot of get feedback from the community. Like if you have any feedback, please join our Slack and give us feedback on the project itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thanks, Kannan. Thanks a lot.
See you next week. Bye.